Hello and welcome everyone to tonight's virtual event. My name is Alexandra and I'm one of the events hosts at Brookline Booksmith in Brookline, Massachusetts normally, but today we're all over the place. I would like to start by thanking you all for being here tonight and for everyone who is supporting these incredible authors and our bookstore, either by purchasing the book through us or by choosing to pay your way into the event, or even just being here and letting us, imagine we can see your lovely faces. It's always nice. So a couple Crowdcast Pro tips before we begin. You can chat the whole time, as many of you have already discovered right on the little side panel there. My face will go away in a few seconds, but I'll still be available in the chat throughout the event if you have any questions or problems. Weirdly enough, we actually encourage conversation throughout the event because it is a surefire way to let us know that you can hear us and the internet is working. You can also ask questions in the little question box right below, or any question you pose in the chat, you'll be given the option to corral it into the question box, and that is where we'll pull questions from at the end of the event. Okay, so I'm so excited to be able to be hosting this because it features two incredible female authors of whom I am personally very fond. So first, I'm joined by Nadja Spiegelman, who is the author of the memoir, I'm Supposed to Protect You from All This, as well as several graphic novels for children. She's the co-creator of Resist and an online editor of the Paris Review. And of course, the author of the hour, we have Nina MacLaughlin joining us tonight to celebrate her latest release, The Summer Solstice, which I don't have a copy of yet, but I do have Wake Siren behind me. So additionally, Nina is the author of Wake Siren, Ovid Resung, and the acclaimed memoir, Hammerhead. Formerly an editor at the Boston Phoenix, she worked for 9 years as a carpenter and is now a books columnist for the Boston Globe. So without further ado, please join me in a very warm virtual welcome for Nina MacLaughlin and Nadja Spiegelman.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys all for being here. This is really incredible. I also want to thank off the bat Nadja. She and I have worked together for many years now on a bunch of pieces. And this is the first time we're sort of meeting. And so this is a real pleasure. And I want to also, you guys all should get her book. It's fantastic. It's a beautiful memoir about what it is to have a mother and a grandmother, and it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And so, yeah, and thank you to the Booksmith, which is one of the sort of great havens of the world around here. And I'm rooting for its spirit every day. I'm going to start and read a really quick chunk from this this new book, and then we can sort of get into the conversation. It's sort of, I mean, as you guys might know, it's a sort of a meditation on summer. And this small chunk I'll read is about swimming. I like to swim at Walden Pond. If you stand still, water up to your ankles, the small fishes come and bite at your toes. The water is clear, feels clean, gets deep. One afternoon, I swam a short distance away from the shore. The water was quickly over my head. A residual pleasure from childhood is dropping myself to the bottom and then using the strong muscles in my legs to blast up through the surface. I sent my body downward, down, down. Where's the bottom? Will I reach it? Bubbles rising, my body dropping, darker, colder, and then the landing. I felt the sand with my feet and let my body hang there for a moment, suspended near the bottom. Let every muscle dissolve, a total floating stillness. The front of my body aimed upward. I am gone. The world is gone. Everyone is gone. I have both entered and exited, and now the simplicity of hanging in space, held by the tiny silky hands of the water. Above, far away as the moon, gauzy light at the surface, shaking. I placed my feet on the sand, crouched, and with all the strength in my legs, pressed against the bottom and went rocketing up toward the light. I blasted through the surface, sucking air into my lungs. Had I been gone 10 seconds, an hour, a year? In the moments I was out of existence, nothing had changed, and everything felt new. We enter water and we leave ourselves. Gravity loosens and we swim into a slow trance. We swim into wisdom. And what is the wisdom? It is of being unseparate, It is a temporary return to the unbroken planet where we exist as both whole and dissolved. In the bright dark of water, we're wet at the throat, at the back of the neck, in the ears, on the eyelids, and the water on the skin gives a literal cleansing. We emerge from waves onto beach, up the shining metal ladder off the side of a pool, onto the twiggy banks of a river, onto a lakeshore surrounded by pine forest, first smoke of campfires rising on the banks, and the world is reset. We return to ourselves, separate and distinct once again, severed from the all, with only the memory of that quick glimpse into the mystery of what was.
That was so nice, Nina. I assume that everyone is clapping wildly at home. This is, as Nina said, so fun for me because we've known, Nina and I have been in very intimate correspondence for years now. Nina's two brothers are married to two of my very close friends from college who I see, at least Molly is here, maybe Miranda also. And so Nina wrote they gave her my book, and Nina wrote one of the most emotionally attuned and insightful reviews of it. And then when I started working at the Paris Review, we began working together on a column about November. That was one of the very first columns that I had done as an editor. And then it's gone on from there. We've had all these intimate back and forth in the comments, but we've actually never seen each other's faces. So this is, even if it feels far away from you, it's very intimate for us to get to meet each other this way. When you first wrote to me about wanting to do a column on summer, Nina, you said it's a moment like November where the door between this world and the other world swing open, a hinge in the year. Can you talk a little bit more about how summer is a threshold and what drew you to it as a subject?
Sure. So, I mean, I think with the summer solstice, you're kind of you're reaching the season, I mean, this is the official start of summer, but what it also signals is the start of the darkening. And so it's this sort of, I don't know, to me, it has this sort of really exciting, compelling two sides, the sort of oh, here we are coming into the real heat of the season. And after this point, each day gets darker. And in fact, I love it because I way prefer the darker half of the year. I love it when the days get shorter. So it's for me, it's not oh, I'm so excited it's summer. It's oh, I'm so excited it's starting to get dark again. So, and I just think there's something I don't know, magic about these kind of transition moments. And it goes back, I don't know, in this sort of mythology and sort of, I don't know, legends and myths sort of are all focusing on these sort of, hinges, hinges in the year. I love it.
It's part of what I love about your writing, that you are constantly drawn to these thresholds that contain opposing forces whose existence is dependent on each other. Light and dark, life and death, summer and winter. And in this book, you talk about the Oak King and the Holly King, and the describing them as two halves within the whole, each force in tension with the other, pushing against, pulling apart, each wanting to overpower its opposite, its irreconcilable twin. What I like when you draw these distinctions is that you don't draw them to show that they are fully opposite, but in fact that they each contain the other. And so to me, this felt like a way for you to explore your love of November through summer.
Right. I'm only constantly writing about November.
Have you? Well, maybe you can talk a bit about the Oak King and the Holly King, in particular.
Sure. So it's sort of, I mean, this is, this sort of legend that the Oak King rules the light half of the year, and then the Holly King rules the dark half of the year, and they're brothers, and they battle for control over the year. And on the summer solstice, the Holly King, who I think of as kind of the darker, more mischievous half of the year, overtakes his brother and takes control of the year. And then once come the winter solstice, the Oak King overpowers the Holly King, and he takes the control for the lightning half of the year. And it's funny, I mean, working on this and sort of reading about this, I mean, it certainly made me more aware of oak trees and holly bushes all around. And I around the winter solstice, I clipped some holly from the neighbors, illegally maybe, and brought it inside and put it alongside some acorns. So I think I'm becoming like, it sort of made like writing these summer solstice pieces made me kind of like a real pagan, I think.
I love that you have these deep recurring obsessions. I think it's part of what makes a great artist is that no matter what your subject, it sort of goes back to these eternal tensions. But you also evoke summer so specifically and so sensorially with frog song and bug song and dew and campfire smoke and the first sleep with windows open and fat red tomatoes and the smell of cut grass. As a perception at the edge of the senses. What was summer for you as a child, and what is it now these days?
Gosh, you know, I sort of admit in an afterword, which didn't appear on the columns that I did with you, that like summer is in fact I think my least favorite season. In part,
I read that and it made me laugh because yes, that's the one part of the book that wasn't online. I had no idea But I think the line is specifically like, anyway, I don't like summer. I didn't know that the whole time we were working on this.
Yeah. I think, you know, it's funny. I don't know if you feel this way, Nadja. Like if there's certain parts of the year where your brain just feels like more alive and sort of sharper and better. In the fall for me, like I'm just like in the fall and winter, like I just feel like sharper and more myself. And in summer, like I think it's like I sweat so much, you know, like I'm just like I feel like my brain melts and like I just don't feel like an intelligent person, you know. And so, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, actually, and working on this too, did sort of in really thinking hard about like the senses of summer, like it did increase my appreciation. And I was like, you know what, maybe it's not so bad, you know? And there are things I love. I mean, I love being in water. I love swimming. Growing up, you know, like my grandmother lived near the ocean and we would sort of spend time there every summer and swimming was a big part of that. Being with her was a big part of that. I love a grilled hot dog, you know, I mean, that's like a great pleasure. And I
call it,
what's that?
You call it the nostalgic season.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something like I think it's you sort of like looking back, summer always has that kind of like free feel when you're thinking about it, maybe like that there's that looseness of youth. I think it's hard to be in summer and not think about like, oh, the school year is over. Oh, like, you know, like my responsibilities are gone. And so I think that lives in us. As adults too, it's hard not to sort of, you know, once the weather gets warm, not to think like, okay, like everything's a little looser. And I think in that way we can sort of like nostalgically experience youth again.
Yeah, you have this really beautiful line that summer contains the residual self-evidence of childhood. And I love the ways in which you write about things that are so personal, like campfire smoke recurs, and it's so clear that this is something that you have felt. That passage you read is in the first person, but you also throughout these essays use the second person and use these very personal sensorial details in ways that become so immediately universal. And that feels very generous. Let's see. I guess it might not have been clear in what we were saying so far, but so Nina and I worked on three so far. We're working on the fourth one now. Different columns together. The first one about November, then about dawn, and then about the summer solstice. And one of the wonderful and interesting things about publishing online is that everything is so ephemeral and immaterial and available at the touch of a button, and exists in time and space in a different way. And one of the ways in which it was so exciting to work with Nina was that we were also working with the precision of timing of publishing online. So the series that you did on November, we published every week in the month of November. The series that you did on Dawn, we published every day at 5:23, 5:24, 5:25 in the morning, right as dawn was breaking. And the series in the Summer Solstice, we published every Friday in June, leading up to the actual Summer Solstice. And the pieces are meant to sort of build as you can feel the Summer Solstice approaching. And yet now it has become this extraordinarily gorgeous book object, not just a book, but a really beautiful book. Do you have it? Can you hold it up?
Yeah, gosh. It's like, it's so, I don't know, I hope that's not getting too glary. It's, gosh, I feel like I can just like unreservedly say that it's just like, it is so beautiful because I didn't have anything to do with the design. I want to thank, Black Sparrow, God, it's just like, it feels magic to hold it. Josh Bodwell, who's the sort of the head of Black Sparrow, did a great job. Jennifer Muller was a sort of designer, and it's on this like, it's a letterpress printed up in Maine. Jennifer is a Maine designer. And it's just got this kind of like, I don't know, I think this kind of like mystical honeycomb feel, and it's like slim and light and it fits in your pocket. So like, yeah.
I highly recommend buying it through the very convenient green button below our faces. How does that change? How does that change the text's relationship to time and space, and maybe the reader's relationship to the text, to have it be an object that can sort of exist at any time, rather than something that's coming out in this sort of pulsating way as summer approaches?
Yeah, it's interesting to think of like, it does, I don't know, I think there's something about the sort of object of it that does have like a little bit more magic than sort of reading it on a screen. And I hope, that like the words are alive and sort of active in, through the screen as well. But there's something, I don't know, like having it as something you can hold and pull out and give does change the feel of it in the sort of like permanence department, it is a book that you want to be able to give as a gift too, in the same way that you want to be able to give the gift of the feeling of summer to the people that you love, because so much of the book contains that. And I'm curious to reread it myself in the winter and to sort of feel what it's like to read it when you're far away from the season. Yeah.
And speaking of it as an object, it's so filled with references. It literally contains, which I did not online, a reference manual at the end of different plants, but it also is so filled with literary references, and you reference so widely. You reference Anne Carson and Mary Swanson and James Joyce, but also Tove Jansson, Led Zeppelin, the 7th century lyric poet Alkman, the haikuist, whose name I'm going to mangle, Kobayashi, could you say this person's name? Kobayashi? Yes. How do you pull in, you never reference the things that would seem obvious to reference. When you never reference anything that would come up if you just typed in summer quotes into Google. And so how do you find all of these disparate pieces of other text to pull into yours?
I think sometimes it's a matter of like, it's luck sometimes. Sometimes I'll remember like, oh, this thing that had to do this, like I remember this hinging on some sort of theme that I'm sort of wanting to explore. And sometimes, when I know I'm working on something, it will be my attention will be aimed that way. So everything that I'm taking in will be like, oh, look, there's a summer reference, and sort of like put them aside and kind of store them up. I have found that like Moby Dick has every single thing you want to talk about. Like you can just like type in like search Moby Dick for like summer solstice, and like inevitably like everything's in there. And it's the same in some of those, like I have an anthology of haiku, and it's the same thing. It's like you can essentially find everything that you're looking for. So in part it's a concentrated effort during the time that I'm working on, and part it's a it's sort of just like, having this kind of storehouse of the stuff that I've sort of read and experienced, and like sometimes have good luck enough to remember. There's a poet that I reference, which comes into the book, which was not in the columns that we worked on. Ingrid Christensen, who I was introduced to this last year, and she's this great maniac. I keep talking about her. I have this tiny little powerful book club, and that was our first book, and it was great to bring her genius into that. So that, again, just like sort of chance and good luck and sort of just being alert to what sort of I'm taking in.
You're so clearly a very careful and good reader, as so many good writers are. And how do you find the books that you're going to read? How do you read?
Gosh, I mean, I've been having, I don't know, I think like a lot of people right now, like it's hard to read. I'm having a lot of trouble reading. And I have for a little while. I'm finding it hard to sort of stick with everything, or stick with anything. And I also am like, I am definitely not someone who feels compelled to finish a book if I start it, that it's like, if I don't like it, like I'm not wasting my time. So I'm very quick to discard books. And so I don't know, I'm also, I think right now in the last few months have been sort of like, I used to only read sort of 1 or 2 books at a time. And right now sort of have like a bunch going. And so, it really has to do with mood. It has to do with what's coming out. It has to do with what sort of where I don't know what I'm working on and where I want my attention to be. Right now, like before I go to sleep, I'm reading a book by Madeleine L'Engle that I read for the first time when I was 11, because I think it's like the only thing my brain can handle right now. I'm reading Air and Dreams. I don't know if that's the right title, by Gaston Bachelard, which is like, he's a maniac. And that's a lot about, actually, that's for you, Nadja, because that's a lot about the sky. Nadja and I are working now on some columns about the sky. And Vertigo by W.G. Sebald right now, again, for my book club. So it's mood. It's just like, it's mood, and it's sort of whatever my interests are. And it's recommendations. I think, like one of the things is that, my young brother Sam works at a bookstore, and so he's a font of recommendations. My other brother Will is the sort of wideliest read human that I know, and so he's a good recommender. So I have people also in my life sort of feeding me good stuff.
My reading has also been my attention span has been so scattered, and we had a brief conversation before this of like, okay, I know that like the only question I really want to ask about summer is what the hell is summer 2020 going to look like? But like, and like, do I mention what's going on? It seems psychotic not to mention it. But also in the same way that you're talking about reading, everything that you read sort of relates to what you're thinking about. And as I was reading your pieces again and thinking sort of about your central interest in these opposing forces that are dependent on each other. The line struck me: darkness unspools so slowly it looks like light. The end unspools so slowly it looks like the beginning. And it made me think about how we're in this very strange moment where something enormous is happening and also nothing is happening. We're all just sitting in our houses. And sort of wonder if you've been thinking about it in those central terms with which you seem to understand the world.
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's a hard question. Part of me feels, I think what I'm struggling with is that it in some ways, things feel so normal and things feel so totally, completely upside down, and it varies like hour to hour, like, because like you can sort of go through a day and it's like, well, this feels sort of like regular life, and then it's like you get kind of slammed and sort of twisted upside down, and it's like, oh man, like, no, this is like nothing else. And I think for me so far, trying to pay attention, trying to sort of figure out what do I feel? What is happening? It sort of feels at this moment too big to know and too big to understand. Like there's no frame of reference, I don't think, that anyone has right now to be like, oh, well, like this reminds me of the time when like that doesn't exist. So it's like the making sense is kind of happening like moment to moment, which is like which is the
Sorry.
that's okay. Which is, it's like it's a trickier. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, like I haven't figured out how to like use my mind yet in this. And I don't think, I mean, that's not our responsibility. I think our responsibility right now is to like, yeah, I mean, I guess pay attention and just like be smart and safe, like really more than anything.
Yeah, it makes me think of Franny Bliss gave such a great interview to the New Yorker recently, and one thing she says is like it's so exciting to reach not exciting, but it's interesting to reach the age that she is now, and to have something happen that doesn't remind you of anything else that's ever happened before. But to somehow segue back into summer, I mean, so many of the levels of your book are about like recurrent nostalgia and recurrence, sort of like the ways in which things do remind you of every summer that's come before, but also the ways in which summer is eternal and going to continue, and it ties back so beautifully to all of these ancient and pagan understandings of summer. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the summer solstice rituals and what those were.
Sure. So a lot of them had to do with fire. A lot of them had to do with big sort of bonfires, jumping over flames, staying up all night, keeping the flame lit all night, throwing flowers into the fire. A lot of it had to do with, like health and fertility, both for humans and babies and love, and also for farms and crops. And some of it, the flower crowns was a big part of it. There's one that like I don't know, like that, like I just love, which is I guess well, for one thing, all the plants and the herbs around the solstice are supposed to have their like highest potency, which is really, I don't know, which is cool to think about. Like, so harvesting your herbs and very specific plants is good to do at that point. And like you can get really witchy about it or wizardy. There's a lot you can read about certain plants and spells and the different powers they have. And I included some in the back of the book. But there's this one thing where the dew on the summer solstice is supposed to be imbued with a lot of magical powers for like youth and health and vitality. And so what you're supposed to do is on the morning of the summer solstice, like touch the grass or touch some plants or any dew zone, and then touch your face, which I did, again, turning into a pagan this last summer solstice. Like I went out to the grass by my apartment and I was like, oh yeah, cool, I'm gonna do it.
Well, so I was going to ask you if you had recommendations for how one could celebrate the summer solstice while safely socially distancing.
Yeah, I mean, go out and find some dew, like find a grass or some plants, a park. That's something you can sort of do solo. I feel like the bonfires and the sort of like orgiastic parties are like a little off limits. And I think like, taking the plants into your home, like that really is sort of another part of it. And there is, as I said at the end of the book, like descriptions of the ones you can sort of that aren't that uncommon.
You want to tell us about one that might be common that we might be able to find?
Sure. Like I don't know, like I think of like, this was a yarrow is like I don't think I would have known what it is. It's this yellow flower with like tons of little tiny flowers. It sort of looks like Queen Anne's lace, but yellow, which is around. And it's like, I mean, all these are, it's an anti-inflammatory, anti-spasmodic, makes your fever go down. Mugwort, which you can, I mean, many have heard of that. Lavender, common lavender. And again, they all sort of like, they're all supposed to sort of like calm you down and make your blood move. St. John's wort, supposed to cheer you up. St. John's wort, yellow blast of like buttery cheer absorbing the sun. It's supposed to like give you a sunny disposition.
One of the things you also said in your first email to me about doing summer, I'm going to make like I didn't write it down, but it was about sort of the mysteries of summer, and also the science of summer, and the overlap between sort of the mystical tradition and the science of it. And one of the most beautiful and central places in these essays, you get to the idea of the meristem. And I wonder if you can talk about the meristem.
Oh yeah, man, that's so cool. So I was sort of alerted to that by this this potter named MC Richards, who wrote a book called Centering, and she, I think, is like a complete and total mystic, man. She was really cool, and I think also a poet. And she wrote about the meristem, and it's this part, it's this sort of like the marrow of a tree, and it's there from the start, and it's what keeps a tree growing and growing out and more and more and more. And there was something, God, I just found so beautiful about that sort of like ongoing kind of like life force, like not youth exactly, but that kind of like, gosh, that ongoing fire, you know, that like lives in us. I don't know. It just felt like, I think that, you know, the trees have it, I think we have it. And I think it's like something that we can sort of like access and return to. And sort of, I think, can get bogged down. Like if you think of a tree, like the rings and the layers going out, it's like, all right, there's so much kind of like exteriority, but then in the center, there's still this like, like potent force. And so I think like it's the same for us, you know, it's like you can get these layers of just like, you can forget the kind of like essentialness.
Sorry, my cats have gotten into a giant argument. But, I think it's okay. All of the interruptions of not being able to do this in the bookstore. I love that idea that we can, and it's part of what you come to in many other ways throughout these essays, that summer contains childhood and we contain childhood, and it always will. But even if all of these other meanings and understandings and layers grow over it. Do you think that it was always that way? Do you think that people always thought of summer as a return to youth?
Wow, cool question. Man, I don't know. I mean, it's like I link that so much up with the idea of school, the rhythms of the sort of school year, you know, and so I mean, thinking back. Yeah, I mean, maybe in some ways, like I think there is a loosening, you know, there's like a bounty, there's a, you know, the crops are coming in, you're not going to be like shivering and worried about food, you know? So I do think like there is that kind of, that looseness, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I do think, I don't know. I suspect that there was a youthfulness to like summer for all time. It feels like the less frightening season.
Yes, that makes sense. What is it that you love about darker, colder days, other than sort of the coolness allowing you to think better?
Yeah, I think I like the light more. I think that the light in November, for example, is a sort of most exciting and dynamic light of the year. I think that for me with November, what it sort of activates in the sort of like the world getting colder is this reminder. This sounds so grim, gosh. This reminder that like we're gonna die, our lives will end, and therefore, for me, it sort of elicits this feeling of enhanced vitality. You know, that it's just like, oh, like things will end. You're alive right now. You know, and so that's what it really kind of like. It is this kind of like internal fire that gets stoked. Like, all right, the world is kind of shutting down. The world is dying.
Is that audible? I'm so sorry. Voodoo and TK, and usually they get along, but right now they are really not. But it will be okay. I'm looking through my notes for, because it's true. In the pieces about November, you're talking about death, and you're talking, and that awareness of death makes life so much sweeter and richer and more worth living. And then in the piece about summer, there's, I wrote it down somewhere, this line that I just love, where you're like, the days are getting shorter and shorter, and you're going to die, and you have work to do. And have you prepared yet for winter? And have you remembered that you're going to die? And so maybe it's because everything contains this opposite. As the days, as we're approaching winter and our deaths, we can remember to appreciate our lives. But as we are sort of in the summer of our lives, the only other thing we can think of is the constant reminder of our approaching death.
Totally.
Where literally did you spend your summers?
So my grandmother lived on Nantucket, and so that we would spend summers there, and then just like for usually 2 weeks a year, and then just like in my Massachusetts suburb where I grew up.
There's an image of campfire smoke that appears at the beginning and at the end. But in the beginning, it's the smell of campfire smoke in someone else's hair, and then it's the campfire smoke in your own hair. I wondered if that tied to a very specific memory for you, if it was a recurring memory.
Yeah, there is. I mean, yeah, totally. I mean, so in the summers, there were these sort of impromptu bonfire parties every night on the beach when I was, like 16, and I would sneak out of the house and like go to them. And so it was like, this sort of smoky, beachy, like summery scenes that was sort of like, this, like, I mean, it was pretty fun. It was like a pretty fun time. That was like a fun summer. And I think there is something so evocative, like having your hair smell like, or like your sweatshirt or whatever, having yourself smell like smoke in that way. Feels like a summery memory.
What are you looking forward to this coming summer?
Gosh, man, like I feel like right now I'm thinking like to like the evening, like I'm like not thinking too far ahead, like, so it feels, I still feel like I haven't thought, it's almost like I can't, I've sort of like, no, I'm not letting myself think too far, like even like to next week. So yeah, I don't know. Gosh, I mean, like I have like a great kernel of hope, and also feel like I want to like stay to like the very near future. Like
I completely relate to that. It's very hard to imagine summer.
Totally.
I cannot believe. Oh,
Go ahead.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to move us towards questions.
Yeah, please. That's great.
I can't believe there are 117 people in front of their screens right now. That is really incredible. Thank you all so much for making time in your day to watch us talking to each other. It's wonderful. Should we field questions?
That would be great. The Booksmith.
I'm coming. I'm sorry. Oh, awesome. Hi. Okay. So if anybody wants to drop some questions in, now's the time. You can do it with this little, it's the second one in with the little bar on the bottom. So let me just get this open. Okay. So this one is from Susie. And can you say more about what the dark months mean to you? So many dread the absence of light.
Yeah, sure. That's a good question, Susie. I don't know. I think, I think that we're all like deeply affected by light and the rhythms of the year. And I think that I think like, the idea of like seasonal affective disorder, I feel like we're all seasonally affected. And I think that, for me, it is like those darker months. Again, like it's this enhanced aliveness, and I understand. I think like I approach summer in some ways with the same dread as many people do winter, and it actually I realized finally. I mean, it takes me so long to figure this stuff out. finally I realized that like one of the hardest parts of the year for me is like the end of February moving into March, where like there's like a ton of light all at once. And I think it just like makes my brain go haywire. Like I sink into this total funk and really feel like quite undone. And it is this kind of dread and just like off feeling. And I do think it's that what I imagine might be the same case for like in the sort of darkening of the year, October, November, for a lot of people, when it's just like, all right, shoot, like here we go, like hunker down, stay warm. So it's just, I don't know, it's sort of, I think, a little bit reversed for me.
That totally makes sense. Okay, this one is from Nosley. You have undertaken so many ambitious and very specific projects in recent years. The November essays, Wake Siren, this new book. Do you think you could have done this 5 years ago or 10 years ago? What changed about your practice or about you?
That's a great question, Nosley. No, I think with each project, they can only happen at the time that they happen. Like, I don't think that you can sort of force these things. Like, I don't think I could have written Wake Siren in another moment. Like that had to happen after exactly the amount of life I'd lived and things I'd read. And it's the same with this, like these ideas, like, you know, they like sync up at the time they need to. I feel like what's changed, gosh, I don't know. I mean, partly it's more practice, you know, it's just like it's more years under my belt. And it's sort of just like, and I think also too, actually, maybe even more so, like a different aiming of attention. I think that is maybe the biggest part. It's like, where am I focusing my attention?
Totally. Sorry, is this better? If people in the comments were saying they couldn't hear me reading the question, so I helmeted up, and hopefully that's helpful. Okay.
I can repeat them too. I'll repeat them too, just in case.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So this question is from Sam. Nina, you spoke to this a little bit, but are you known to hate summer? You are known to hate summer incorrectly, according to some. Did writing the book change your understanding of the season? If so, what and how?
Good question, Sam. Yeah, it totally did, actually. It really did. The question, I'm sorry, just in case you didn't hear, was, did the writing of this effect change the way that I feel about summer as sort of a notorious, at least in my family, and I don't know, that might be my brother, Sam, who's asking this question. Did writing this change my relationship with it? And it did. I mean, it like, I was really sinking into the kind of like sensual charms of the season, you know, and thinking about like, man, I do love swimming, you know, like I love being in water, and like the flowers are beautiful, and like there's something, you know, like the sort of colors and vibrancy and like, I don't know, like it took a long time to like just be like, all right, I'm just going to be sweating all the time. Like, fine. That's just like how I am. So it did, I think, make me like it a little bit more. Yeah, I admit it. And yeah, like going out and like touching dew. I mean, that's good. That's cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. I will fully admit, when you were talking about touching the dew, I was like, I've got to try that. Okay, this one is from Lauren. In which season did you write this book? And are there ways in which that influenced your perspective and insight? Cool,
that's a great question. So I think I was writing this like almost exactly at this point last year. So it was sort of in the lead up to, like, it was probably like late April and May, in the lead up to last year's solstice. And I think like when I think about like the agility of my brain, it's like, I think I do get panicked at this point of year, because I'm like, okay, shoot, like I only have like this many more weeks or months of like a sharp head before summer comes in, and it's just like melted cheese. And so it's this kind of like frantic last gasp at like coherency. So I think that, you know, writing it in the moment of kind of like the light was coming back, and feeling that kind of like the summer in the offing. Like, I mean, yeah, I think it would have been a really different experience to try to write it, you know, in like January, for sure.
Did you find yourself editing it and working on the book in a different season?
Let's see. Yeah, I was actually, where are we? We're in April. So this was, yeah, it was more in the winter. And there was something like a balm about kind of returning to some of these ideas, and like there's like something soft about it, you know, like there's something like melty. And so returning to that and writing some of the extra stuff, like there's a closing chunk about fruit flies. And I think I was writing that in the winter. And that was actually so fun to write, like conjuring what it is to have like a kitchen full of fruit flies and like trying to murder all of them. And it's just like that kind of imaginative work of like situating yourself somewhere else seasonally.
Totally. Okay, this one is very fun. I've never had a question like this at a book event, so I'm excited to hear the answer too. Did you take notes on your phone when you were writing the installments? Taking notes on smartphones is changing the way writers write these days. So I wonder if you took notes on your phone and then used those in writing the book. And that's from Antonio.
Antonio. Oh, wow. Okay. So just in case people didn't hear the question, did I take notes on my phone when I was writing it? Only very rarely. I like to have my phone in my hand as little as possible. Occasionally, if I was out and like walking down the street and had my phone in my pocket and, you know, some line or a few words comes to mind and like, okay, it's like, don't forget it, you know, like then I would tap it down. But I tend not to do that. I carry lots of little notebooks around and pencils. So I sort of like, yeah, I stay away from the screens as much as I can. I mean, I do think, you know, like writing, I usually start by handwriting. I usually kind of like make lists of like what I'm going to include in whatever I'm working on. And that always sort of starts with a pencil on graph paper. And then I think it's a really different type of thinking when you're at the computer or if you're looking at your phone, for me anyway.
Yeah. Nadja, how about you? Do you take notes on your phone when you're working on something?
Sometimes, because on the subway it's a lot easier, but luckily I haven't been on a subway in a really long time.
There's a whole like sub level, I think, of internet discourse that is just like 3 a.m. poetry you write on your phone and forget about. And so I think I really like that question, Antonio. Okay, 1 second. All right, this is from Allie. And how do you get down ideas you have for a book, or do you just start writing?
Cool. Yeah. So the question being, how do I get ideas down for a book, and do I just start writing? Gosh, it varies. Each one has been really different for me. With Wake Siren, I was sort of like, it started sort of almost by accident. I was rewriting a story from Ovid almost as like an exercise to get my brain, my sort of writing muscles back. And it just sort of took off. So I usually, it's notes. I mean, it's like reading and notes and like, yeah, I mean, it's like with Solstice and some of this, I mean, for this project that I'm working on with Nadja now about the sky, it's just like paying attention to the sky all the time, you know, having written many, many words about the sky, and reading about it and sort of underlining stuff. And it's like, I guess it's an act of accumulation, really. I think I guess maybe if anything, it's an act of accumulation for all of them. So it's just like images, ideas. Yeah, I guess I'm not being very articulate about it, but yeah, so I guess it's kind of a mystery.
I like it. I think if anything, that actually is like, that's how it should be. It should be a very abstract and intimate personal journey. So this one is from Kristen. What books, if any, would you recommend reading to better understand your perspective or writings? Whoa.
Just in case people didn't hear, what books would I recommend people to read to better understand my perspective or writing? Was that accurate? Yeah. Oh gosh, you know, there was a review in the New York Times this weekend, the book review, and it was, I think, David Orr writing about the prose work of the poet Kay Ryan. I'm hoping I'm getting all those names right. And there was a line about how, like, when poets try to write prose, you get a lot of mystical bombast. And I think he meant it as like a total diss. And I read that and I was like, man, like that's all I want. Like I just want to get like mystically bombasted all the time, you know? So I, you know, shoot, like Annie Dillard means a lot to me. Ingrid Christensen, who I mentioned before, the poet. There's a Chilean poet named Raul Zurita, who I think is like amazingly beautiful. And I don't like, whatever, I'll just leave it there. You know, I mean, gosh, Herman Melville is a great mystic.
Before, when you had mentioned Moby Dick, someone in the comments was like, oh, take off the Nina MacLaughlin makes a Moby Dick reference on your bingo card.
Oh gosh. Yeah, maybe I'll try to like steer away from
I think you should embrace the Moby Dick. Yeah.
But yeah, those are a few. I mean, I think, yeah, Annie Dillard for me, I think is like, you know, like what I appreciate about her is her kind of like exuberance and curiosity and attention to nature and sort of like the sort of ability to kind of be, you know, focus on like the frog and also like the cosmos. That's, I don't know, that's always appealing to me.
Yeah. Okay, so this next one is from Alicia. I wonder if you can comment on the role ritual plays in experiencing the season. If we have a summer without summer camp, without open parks and lakes and outdoor parties and barbecues and fireworks and all those smells, will it still feel like summer?
Wow, I mean, what a great question. How much ritual plays into our understanding of the season. I mean, I think that's true for all of them. You know, it's like, you know, if you think of winter and the winter solstice, which corresponds, you know, around Christmas and Hanukkah, and sort of the idea of like lighting up the darkness, Halloween being again a sort of another hinge into the darker, colder time of the year. And they're so important. They sort of, I think, ground us in the year, these moments and these rituals. I mean, what I'm finding right now, I guess it's like, despite all of the sort of trappings of our social lives gone at this moment, spring is continuing to unfold. You know, the flowers are still happening. The daffodils are still coming up, and the tulips and the peonies in the neighborhood are like getting taller. So I think despite not having the kind of like the picnics and the bonfires, there is still this, I mean, gosh, like the natural unfolding that we can really kind of attune ourselves to right now. And maybe that's like a beautiful opportunity without the kind of fizz of regular life.
It's true. So that was a good question. Now I'm going to be thinking about that all day.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Okay, this one is from Julia. Can you talk more about Madeleine L'Engle?
Great. I would love to talk more about Madeleine L'Engle. So like A Wrinkle in Time is like, I think I rank as like perhaps my all-time favorite book. And in feeling like none of the books I was picking up recently were landing in any way, I pulled Many Waters off the shelf. And that's the sort of like, that's in the Wrinkle in Time series, but it's sort of a lesser known one about the twins in that family. And it's just like, there's manticores and there's like unicorns and like, you know, the space-time continuum. And it's just like, God, it's such a relief, you know, to just be like, heck yeah, like going to bed and like reading like, you know, like a page and a half before falling asleep. Again, sort of returning, I guess, sort of gently like regressing a little bit to just like, this is a gentler time and sort of like the imagination. Like I felt like a long way removed from that for a while. But I think A Wrinkle in Time for me, I read and I was just like, wow. I mean, that was a book that I was like, wow, like I think like I want to be a a writer, maybe, when I was a kid.
That's awesome. Okay. This is from a different Kristen. So there's two Kristens.
Great.
New Kristen. Sticking with the topic of seasons, having grown up in New England, do you need the seasons, or could you live in a November environment like Seattle?
Gosh, it's funny. I've often longed for where is it November all year? Where is that environment? Because I would move there in a second. Gosh, I do love the seasons. They all have their really desperately beautiful parts. So I think that it would be a false longing. I think that if I were to be, I lived in Ireland for a year, and that has kind of a November-y vibe. It's misty and rainy and cool. And I was into it. It felt like home, it felt like that kind of the vibe was right weather-wise. But I think I would miss it. I think I would miss the seasons. I think I would miss these beautiful, right now, May, I think is another, again, May and November, these beautiful transition moments where you're kind of the shoulder months. It's incredible, So yeah, I think I do need it.
Awesome. Okay, so just for the sake of time, we probably have time for one more question. And so this is coming from Anita, who asks, did you really write this book in just a few months' time? Have you always been such a fast writer?
Well, the Summer Solstice is not a long book, so it's a very short book. So yeah, it did. I wrote these essays over, I don't know, maybe 6 weeks, maybe a little bit less. Wake Siren, I wrote very quickly. No, but my first book took 3 years and 12 drafts. So I don't think of myself as a fast writer. I think of myself as a really slow writer. And I think, again, it's when I set out to write this, I wasn't sort of setting out to write a book. I was setting out to write 4 different essays. So, each one taking however long they took. And I was doing other stuff at the time. I don't know. It's hard to know. It's hard to know. It's because, yeah, I guess these things did happen pretty quickly. But I think of myself as a pretty slow writer.
You're a very careful writer. It's one of the things that's such a joy about working with you, is that you care very much about each word and the rhythm of the sentences, and not in a way that is sort of rigid, but in a way where you really are thinking about the musicality of what you're writing.
Oh, that's really nice.
Sounding that way.
That's really nice to hear. I like to, I don't know, I'm a sucker for the cadence of a sentence. That's really nice.
Yeah, and that's one of the wonderful things about getting to have this event, even that, we had originally scheduled it to be in the store, but because it's online now, we could have Nadja as a moderator and someone who has worked with you before and knows your writing so well. I feel like this was actually a very fortuitous happenstance. So on that note, I am going to just open it up for you guys to do some closing statements or farewells, and thank everybody one more time for coming out tonight and showing support for the Booksmith and for these authors.
Yeah, thank you guys so much, really, for coming. Please support the Booksmith. Nadja, so great. Thank you so much. Yeah, this has really been beautiful.
This has been so much fun. I am so glad to finally have gotten to see your face. I cannot recommend enough the joy that it will bring you to own this beautiful slim object in your home in every season. So please buy it.
Yeah, you do it right there. I've got the button right below us. All right. Thank you both so much. Thank everybody in the audience so much. And I hope you all have a blessed and joyful evening. All right. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.